All right, on this episode of Bowks Talking Bouts, very excited to talk to an individual who will be competing on June 14th as part of DBX 2 Dirty Boxing Championship, going to be getting to the forefront of the combat sports world yet again. And we have Phile Hawes taking on Sasha Palatnikov, and great having Sasha on Bowks Talking Bouts today. How's it going, man?
Yeah, good. No complaints. Ready to go.
Yeah, and when did this Dirty Boxing Championship offer kind of get on your radar? Because you've competed across multiple martial arts rule sets at this point, so I would think that something like this would be intriguing to you. But when did, I guess, the dialogue initially begin for this fight?
It was actually during D-Rod's fight week out in Iowa when he fought at the UFC. I was with our management in Iowa, and I'd always, mentioned, like you said earlier, that I could see myself fighting under the rule set. I thought it was interesting for sure when it was coming out of the woodwork. And basically when actually it was funny. I spoke to the guy who runs Full Send MMA, the online platform. He was actually also kind of part of negotiations, asking me if I was interested, and I told him yes. And then also linked up with my management in Iowa, and we kind of just moved the ball forward from there. And yeah, it was about a little over a month that they were like, yeah, we're gonna have this next show, and they gave me Phile Hawes as the opponent, and I just said let's go.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much you've had in terms of like direct experience working with him, but with Mike Perry being the promoter of this outfit and everything, like, have you had any anecdotal experience with him in the promoter role or anything like that?
No, I've never actually. I've met Mike Perry a couple times, but like the only thing I know, I mean, my homie, D-Rod beat his ass, so in the UFC, so that was kind of the only interaction that I've ever had. But it's like all respect, and but otherwise, yeah, like it's awesome to see him doing what he's doing, and who knows, if he wants to get in there and compete in his own promotion. That's something that I would definitely be interested in potentially doing down the road. So who knows? Maybe after this fight, there's some potential opportunities to fight some pretty big names.
And it's interesting because I was kind of putting those pieces together in a similar way, just your close ties with Daniel Rodriguez and his fight with Mike Perry. It seems like Mike Perry's career really almost like jettisoned after that Rodriguez fight in a certain sense, because I feel like his post UFC run with like BKFC and some of the things he's been doing with like triad combat and boxing since leaving the UFC, it seems like after that fight really kind of like picked up that momentum for him in a certain way. So just interesting to see how things pan out, I suppose.
For sure, for sure.
And it just seems like it's a good time to be getting with Dirty Boxing Championship in general, just with Jon Jones having a partial ownership stake in the company as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it is a very new promotion, but at the same time, like all this, you can say all the talking heads that are involved with the promotion, seem to be pretty mainstream, and people are talking about it. People seem to like the show, like the idea. It's always interesting when a new, promotion comes to the front of the combat sport world, especially with kind of what's going on at the moment, things with GFL didn't pay off, and a lot of fighters were kind of waiting on that, including myself. So, yeah, it's good to have more competition, more ability to compete in that space. And as for me, as one of my goals getting into the combat sports world was, I wanted to be able to have the ability to fight in so many different rule sets as a martial artist. That's like my number one thing is. And this experience, just having all this experience and going and traveling around the world and doing the things that, I enjoy doing is part of all of that. And yeah, I think it's only a good thing, because I don't know, it might not be for you, but for my mind and my point of view, like a lot of the things I see going on in like the world of MMA, like it's very monopolized. And I feel like a lot of guys are missing out on competition in their prime years. So I'm just excited that I'm still considered and stuff like this where I get opportunities to fight, ex-UFC guys and guys that I know of Phile Hawes. I've watched Phile Hawes since the Contender Series. So this is something that, I think is a good name for me and a good spot where, I can shine a little bit.
Yeah, and I definitely get where you're coming from because there is that like monopsony kind of presence that the UFC has over the MMA space, but it seems like I guess other combat sports are almost like given a bit more of a lane in that regard. Like it seems like the oversaturation of I guess MMA really is almost in a way leading to the want and the pursuit of some of these other outside opportunities. So yeah, it's just an interesting landscape, and it seems like you're, to your point, really living out a dream overall by doing this. Just the idea of competing under multiple different rule sets and actually getting to indulge in those independent contractor freedoms as opposed to having the prime years kind of being put on the sidelines almost or put on the back burner in a certain sense, as you mentioned before.
I mean, yeah, for sure. Like my last fight was last year in Singapore, and then unfortunately, I suffered an injury in that fight. So I was on the sidelines for a little bit, but now, jumping back down to Miami, we were in Iowa, it's just the fight game is always a spontaneous and unpredictable one, but at the same time, that's what makes it exciting, and, I'm hoping to go in here, get a great result, put on a show, and then, hopefully get something again. A couple times. I would love to fight a couple more times this year, whether that be again under the Dirty Boxing banner or even with Karate Combat. There are still plenty of opportunities that come up here and there. So, like I said, I'm riding the bike until the wheels fall off, so to speak, and just taking in everything that I can. Because this doesn't last forever.
And it seemed like you understandably felt a type of way after that last Karate Combat outing that you referenced, just because there was like some spiking on your head, which is outside of the rule set, but it was still designated as a victory to your opponent as opposed to a no contest. Like, do you still have a particular, I guess, sour taste in your mouth about that whole situation, or is it kind of just is what it is and you have enough separation from it at this point, I guess?
I mean, I'm confused still of the outcome. I appealed it. I still don't think I've gotten any word on the appeal. Again, something that's completely out of my control, but from everyone with a functional brain and can read the rule set will tell you, it's a striking sport, and now all of a sudden we're able to spike our opponents on the head. It just, I don't know, just doesn't make sense to me. If it was something that was included in the rule set that I knew from the get-go, I would not be having this conversation. I would accept it. I lost fair and square, but never in a million years did I think that would happen, and never in a million years did I even, get ready for something of that nature. This is, if I got dumped on my head in an MMA fight, like I'm not complaining. That's my fault, but that's the problem, in my opinion, when you have new faces in a sport without the experience, changing rules from card to card, without justifying or stating exactly to the fighters what is going on. So it was just more of a circus, in my opinion. And again, this is, I'm just grateful I came out of there, alive. I came out of there walking. I'm just grateful I'm still able to compete, and yeah, it was a bummer. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Like, I'm not gonna deny that in any way, because I thought I was done dirty. To be honest with you, and President Asim, even though he has no affiliation to the decision, it's not his role. He's the president of the company, but just the way he conducted himself as a man who claims that he's for the fighters and this, that, and the other, just. It's just not something that the way that I would have conducted myself. Let me just put it that way. And no hate. I've known the guy for a long, long time, even before we were professional fighters. We used to train together. So I thought there would have been a little bit more, I don't know, a little bit more love, showed in that regard, just because we've known each other for a long time. But it's not personal. I don't really give a shit. It is what it is. It's a fight game. But, yeah, it was annoying because I went in there feeling great, feeling amazing. I was whooping his ass for a minute, and then all of a sudden I'm asleep, So it was a bitter pill to swallow, because I really wanted to get back on the winning track and just get the ball rolling. So it was definitely a bitter pill to swallow in the end. Coming back home with a busted ass neck from Singapore on a 12-hour flight is never fun, but you live, you learn, you go through the experiences, and these are the what make us better people. So that's kind of how it's worked for me.
Yeah, and I've been kind of finding a way to, I guess, phrase this question because, like, a bit before we were talking about the, environment of leagues like Karate Combat, Dirty Boxing Championship, etc., like, just to say, like, their own unique rule sets and creating opportunities for fighters. But is there anything about this particular situation that maybe, I'm trying to find a way to phrase it, not hesitancy per se, but does it impart a certain feeling competing under one of these, newer rule sets, whereby sometimes there maybe isn't that, I guess, fluidity of decision making? Because I feel like if this was something like MMA and an illegal technique was used, there's more of that immediacy of a reaction to recognize it as an illegal technique, whereas, like, maybe that's not the case as much in some of these, like, newer kind of curated rule sets. Like, I hope I'm serving the question well and you're getting where I'm coming from, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, the thing was Karate Combat they had owners before that, right? And they were, like, more of a karate style based promotion at that time. That was their focus. And then the ownership switched it up and brought in more of a viral, president and someone that they were trying to just make things go viral and get a lot of noise. So, he comes from a jiu-jitsu background. He's got a black belt. He's into judo. So he loves grappling. So his whole thing, and then he added submission grappling to the aspect, which in my opinion is the dumbest thing you could ever do. That's just my opinion. If you want to get into grappling, create your own grappling thing. People are not tuning in to watch striking fights to see guys grapple. And, 9 times out of 10 of the fights that you'd see on these things, they're not doing anything. They're just hugging each other, wrestling, collars, highs, and that's it. Unless you're getting high-level guys against nobodies and they're just crushing them, you're not going to get submissions or finishes when you put guys just as good as each other in the submission pit. So I could see the shift that they were making, but I really didn't expect them to change the rule set on the striking aspect. And like I said, I came into Singapore, the incident happened, and then all of a sudden I'm like, hey, that's illegal. Look at the rule sets, look at your website, look at all the documentation and paperwork that shows, that you can't spike an opponent on his head. You can't perform you can't perform a suplex. So these are the things, like I said, when you're young, when you don't have experience, when this has never happened before, it's only something that will happen when it does happen. So have they made any changes? Have they done things to, I don't know, verify their results? Maybe they have. I haven't been following because I haven't been involved in any of the fight cards coming up. But talking on Dirty Boxing, this just simplifies everything. There is no aspect of wrestling in there. If someone picks me up and dumps me on my head, 100% I'm winning by DQ in Dirty Boxing. Throwing hands, throwing elbows, no wrestling, no kicks, no knees. So it simplifies the rule set. And I think that's what Dirty Boxing and Mike Perry were aiming for, where they're looking for something that's pretty straightforward. It's going to get finishes. It's exciting. And I think that they've kind of created that product with Dirty Boxing now.
Yeah, and I was curious because, I mean, you mentioned earlier the work with, Daniel Rodriguez and everything like that, but as far as, like, a specific gym you're getting in work at, because you've been at a few gyms over the years, like through our interviews and whatnot, like you were with Black Zillions many years ago and some stints with Syndicate MMA and Bang Tao Muay Thai as well. Like, whereabouts are you predominantly at these days, you'd say?
When I first moved to Vegas, I was like strictly with Syndicate. And then now, I've been kind of freestyling a lot more. Speaking of, I spent a lot of time at a gym in Las Vegas called Freestyle MMA, with GoCore. And those guys, they're a great bunch of people out there that I train with and spar out of. And I've spent a lot of time in LA, actually, in the OC, training at Classic with Tyler Wombles, like one of the best striking coaches on the planet, in my opinion, and getting in a lot of work with the boys at Tenori, over, at the Tenori gym in LA. So I've been doing just a lot of stuff with, and then, I've been in camp with D-Rod from, before this last fight. We started off in OC and ended up in the mountains in frickin', what's it called? Can't even remember the name where we were. But yeah, in the mountains of California, we were up there for a week, getting acclimatized in the snow, getting our altitude training in, and then we're back in LA, and then we're back in Vegas. So I do a lot of my training between LA and Vegas with D-Rod just because he was in camp, and then straight out of his fight, I was like straight into camp. So I was never really like not training, Once I got back into training from my injury, like I've just been consistent. That's one of the things that I try the most is when I'm healthy is just to be consistently training, because you just never know what phone call is going to come in. I like to stay ready. I've got a lot of experience taking fights short notice and them working out for me. All the debuts I've made, all the opportunities that I have had have all come on short notice, so that's kind of been as a professional, that's how I try to keep my career going, is just being ready, so that when that phone call does come, I can just kind of ramp things up a little bit and then just focusing on what's coming up.
Yeah, no, it seems like a good way to be for sure, man. And yeah, I mean, it's cool to hear you've gotten so many great looks and you're getting even, more great looks where you're at in recent times. But I feel like a name from Syndicate that a lot of people kind of cite and whatnot would be Merab Dvalishvili, and he obviously had a big win over Sean O'Malley over the weekend. Like, did you happen to catch that or have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, of course. I love Merab. Merab's the man. I used to, when I was training at Syndicate, it was, he'd been training there for a while too. And yeah, he's awesome, man. He's one of a kind. He's the GOAT in my opinion. Coolest guy, super nice dude, works so incredibly hard, and all of his hard work is, showing. And that's the beauty of it. And yeah, I just wish him nothing but the best and all the success. And same with all the coaching staff and all the boys at Syndicate too that helped him and have been getting him ready. Like that's the thing in the fight game, when you have a solid group of people around you who want the best for you, you're going to be able to accomplish anything. And you can see that with Merab, and especially with Aljamain. Like, Aljamain is also former champion and is someone that I think has really helped take, Merab to that next level and obviously turning him into the GOAT.
And I'd be curious to get your anecdotal insights on this too, because I saw an old training picture at Syndicate of yourself with, several big names like Sean Strickland, Aaron Jeffrey, but also Patchy Mix was in that picture. And I feel like some people who maybe haven't seen Patchy prior to his UFC debut were kind of, giving him certain flack for his UFC 316 performance. Like, as someone who does have that anecdotal experience training with Patchy Mix, though, can you kind of, just speak to your own, personal experiences with him as it relates to that Mario Bautista fight that he had?
Yeah, he got a lot of hate, obviously, from his performance, but it's like, come on, man, like, he's coming in, off maybe, I think, over a year layoff, getting kind of messed around by, Bellator, PFL, whatnot. And then he took that fight on short notice too. Like, I think it was like 2.5 weeks. Like, people don't realize. And like, he's a big 135er. Like, he's like tall, So I'm sure the weight cut wasn't easy for him. And he just kind of, in my opinion, just based on kind of what I've been through in the fight game and just seen from my own perspective, I think that was a tough weight cut. And I think it had an effect on his physical performance. He just didn't seem like he was reacting how he usually reacts. You know what I mean? Like, it just seems like his central nervous system was fried or something. Like, he just wasn't reacting to punches like he usually does. Didn't initiate any kind of grappling at all. It was a weird fight from what you would usually see in the gym or on the mats with Patchy. And again, like, there are so many factors. There could be nerves. There could be this. There could be that. There's so many things that obviously we don't know. But from what I've seen and obviously what you've seen when he's fought and like the way that he performs, like, that wasn't Patchy. And it happens, right? Like, you come in, like, put a lot on the plate, a big situation. You're fighting in front of Donald Trump. You're fighting, on a pay-per-view. He said a lot of things, a lot of, saying he was going to run through Mario, which, I'm sure only motivated Mario even more. And yeah, he got kind of checked a little bit, but it'll be interesting to see who they match him up with in his second fight. I think that will be like the true, like, welcoming to the UFC, because now he's felt that loss, on his debut, which is obviously not what he wanted. So yeah, just that's the fight game, man. Like, it's all about ebb and flow, like, when you're in the right moment, when you're not in the right moment. Like, look, Merab was on the cusp of getting cut from the UFC at one point. So then he went on like a 13-fight win streak, and look at him now. So yeah, like, some of the guys on the mats would say, like, fucking Patchy Mix is, arguably better than some of the guys that he's training with, right? So, and some of those guys are considered the GOATs. So it's just one of those things. Training's different. Fight world is different. Like, I've fought and trained with guys that are like, I was like, holy shit, like, this guy's going to be the the next double GOAT, like he's going to be double champ. It's insane how good this guy is. And then you go and watch him fight, or they go to perform, and they're just like a shell of what you see in the gym, and vice versa. I've seen guys who just look like garbage in the gym, and even in my mind, I'm like, man, this guy sucks. Like, how is he even doing what he's doing? And then he goes in there and just absolutely runs through his, his competition, and you're just like, how? So MMA math doesn't always work. There's so many variables, and that's what makes like the sport so insane. And what people don't realize is like, yeah, there's so much going on in our lives that like one little thing could really alter it, in terms of performance and the way that, you want to fight to go. So, all respect to Patchy. He came in there on short notice, in a big, big spot. And I think, he's going to come back way better from it,
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I was credentialed for the Bellator Chicago card where he fought Sergio Pettis. And yeah, I mean, definitely not the same kind of output in his UFC debut. I'm inclined to agree with where you're at, where it's like his sophomore fight, I feel like will almost be a better gauge of it. But in that training photo that I referenced that was also there was Chris Curtis, who was in the picture as well, and he fought Phile Hawes in the UFC and whatnot. We've been kind of talking about just the pedigree that Hawes brings. I mean, has fought a lot of ranked individuals in the UFC. I mean, a win over Nasruddin Imavov is massive. So, yeah, I mean, it seems like a very pedigreed opponent and just right in the wheelhouse of the kind of opponents you're looking for.
For sure. I've actually crossed paths with him before he's come to Vegas, and I've never trained with him, but he's been in the cage with a couple guys that you mentioned, Sean Strickland, Chris Curtis at that time. He's an 85er. At that time, I was a 170. So we just unfortunately never really – we had the same management at the time as well with Ruby, so I'm not sure – I'm not sure why we never actually trained together. But, yeah, I mean, the homie Chris, he got the win over him, and we've had some conversations about him and what he brings and what he does. Yeah, he's a talented guy. He's strong. He's powerful. I think he hasn't really been competitive for quite a while, if I'm not mistaken. I think his last fight, I could be wrong, but I think his last fight was in the UFC. So, and that was a few years back. After that, I think I've seen him in like Dylan Dennis's corner against Logan Paul. if that's like any indication of what he's been up to. Seems like he's been boxing, but yeah, to what extent, with who, what kind of training, I'm not sure. But yeah, this is, again, one of those opportunities. I'm a fighter. I don't care who the opponent is. I was intrigued by the name, of course. I do prefer to fight someone that has a name and people know. So that's definitely a good spot to be in. And like I said, I hope that I could quickly smash this guy and then hopefully get an opportunity to fight, someone else. I have some, I might be crazy, but I have some names, and I have some, I'm not going to talk about them now because I don't want to pull a Patchy or anything like that, because, anything can happen in the fight game. But yeah, maybe afterwards you can add, or you'll see after the fight, what are some of the names that I'm interested in dirty boxing, because yeah, I'm a bit crazy, but I also think I can do a lot in that rule set, and I think I can bring some excitement to it.
Yeah, I think anyone who's seen you fight can definitely attest to that. And you mentioned how you weren't able to get in that work with Phile Hawes previously, but I saw one of your favorite guys to work with is Khalil Rountree, and I was just curious to get your thoughts on his upcoming fight with Jamal Hill.
Oh yeah, no, Khalil's the man. I've known Khalil for quite a while. I've been, the first time I knew of Khalil was from The Ultimate Fighter, and that was just me like watching as a fan in Hong Kong, just like, oh, and then seeing him in Thailand. It's actually a funny story. His wife I went to high school with her in Hong Kong. So it's like a super small world in that regard. But, and he lives in Vegas. We trained out of the same gym for a few years. So yeah, I've always got a lot of love for Khalil and love what he's doing. And, his fight against Jamal Hill, I think he's going to smash Jamal Hill, personally. I think he's just too strong, too powerful, too fast. I love working with Khalil when I have in the past. Like that boy could kill me if he wanted to. Like, he just holds back very, very well when he works with the lighter fighters, but very technical guy, very strong, very powerful. And, I've gotten in a lot of work with his strength and conditioning coach as well, Lorenzo Pavlica, with Primetime Performance. So his mindset is like 100%. He's dialed in, and yeah, I think this fight against Jamal Hill will be a really good one.
Yeah, no doubt. And we were talking and have been talking throughout the chat about different martial arts rule sets you've gotten to compete in. And I thought it was cool that you got that game bred bare knuckle MMA opportunity. I guess like a bit of a two-parter. Like, what was it like working with Jorge Masvidal in like the promoter kind of capacity, and also some rumblings of Masvidal returning to the UFC? Just curious your thoughts on, I guess, Masvidal in the promoter role and just some of the rumblings of him potentially returning to the UFC this year.
Yeah, I mean, the whole game bred opportunity was definitely another one that was like, okay, tick that off the box. Didn't go according to plan. That was my last fight at 170, and that was a tough cut. Like, I had a tough time getting down to 170. It wasn't tough to make the weight. It was tough to rehydrate. I had a real issue rehydrating. Getting matched up against Francisco Trinaldo, who's like a former 55er. I obviously had that size advantage, but yeah, I ended up tearing my ACL in the fight, and that was I didn't expect that to happen at all. I was ready to go to war. I'd already signed off on myself going out there like I'm ready to fucking die in there kind of thing, and to go out that way was a bummer. Luckily, I guess in hindsight, you can also say, yeah, I didn't get any damage, didn't get my face blown up. Like, it was just, I tore my ACL. So, but the experience with Gamebred was cool, man. Like, he seems like a cool guy. I mean, I know he had that boxing fight with Nate after the UFC, but I don't know. I mean, again, in my opinion right now, the UFC is like struggling for stars. They're struggling for attention, if that makes sense. They don't really have a ton of guys like they used to. Everyone's getting older. People are losing interest. And I don't know. I think the UFC is kind of diluting their product a little bit, and people are starting to lose interest because of it. Incidents like Macy Barber and with that main event pullout, stuff like that. People are starting to be like, it's almost losing its professionalism or its edge. And maybe bringing in a couple old heads like George or Nate or Connor or Leon, to fight Leon with Jorge. Like, any of these kind of things could be potentially big, I guess. But for me personally, like, I've always said this, and I still believe it. I think they just need to invest more in the youth, more in the young up-and-coming fighters, because the generation of fighters that are coming up now are a completely different version to, like, George, when he was coming up, even when I was coming up, like the new generation. All these guys have got incredible grappling. Their striking is all coming together now as they're getting older, like the likes of, Raul Rosas and a lot of these young up-and-coming fighters. They're just a new hybrid. So I think, in my opinion, if I was in that world, if I was working with the UFC, I would be investing a lot more in them and pushing them more so than trying to push the old heads, because the old heads are just going to demand too much money, and they've only got a short span of life, in the game. Whereas these young guys, you can look at a 10, 15-year investment that could potentially bring you all that money and more. So that's just my perspective. I had the same perspective with GFL. I wish the GFL somehow had come and hired me for consulting. I believe I could have helped that company a lot, just because I'm like, why are you paying guys that are in their 40s millions, or offering them millions or hundreds of thousands of dollars, when they're going to give you one fight, maybe two fights max, and they're going to post it on their social media and no one really cares? Like, you got to invest in the next level, the next generation, the people that nobody knows about. Put them up there so that people are like, oh, I want to see that kid fight. I want to see what he does, what his future brings, not Frank Mir. Like, no disrespect, but it's just like, you know what I mean? Like, it just didn't make sense to me. So, like I said, like, my brain works differently to others, but that's just my perspective on how I see, like, the world of the fight game. And you might agree or you might not, but you see where I am, you see the people I interact with on a day-to-day basis, and it's just kind of like, yeah, that's just how I see how the UFC is going. Now they created that new jiu-jitsu league thing, the slap fighting before that. Now Dana's going into boxing. There's a lot of eggs in a lot of baskets, and it's hard to, focus in on the one that's really been number one, and that's the UFC. So it'll be interesting to see how things go, plus the media deal with UFC, who's going to get that. So yeah, that's just kind of like, my 2 cents on the whole matter.
And it does seem curious in that regard, because I definitely am in agreement with you, and I do Noticed that as well, and it is kind of curious because I mean, you mentioned Aljamain Sterling in a bit of a cursory way earlier in the conversation. Like I remember seeing some articles around like when he had his Sean O'Malley fight, and he was talking about like, oh, you know, I took the fight on kind of short notice, and I was doing it because you know O'Malley is really presented as this superstar kind of character. Like, think he would make a difference in his bottom line in terms of the pay-per-view points, but he was saying that it wasn't to the degree that I think a lot of people would expect. I guess maybe a broad question and perhaps difficult to answer in a sense, but why do you think it has been difficult in recent years for the UFC to really have that transcendent, I guess, star that really penetrates into the pop culture zeitgeist like a Nate Diaz or a Conor McGregor, as we were talking about before?
Well, Nate Diaz is a hard one because there's not a lot of real people in the fight game. Like, the new evolution of the fight game that came from the real guys that came up is like more of an act now, you know, like the Colby, like the guys trying to put on an act or a front of like who they truly are. Even O'Malley, like O'Malley's an act, right? Like, he's not truly like, you know what I mean? Like, he's not, that's just not who he is. It's all a front. It's like he does the tattoos, he does the hair because he knows all the young kids, it gives them attention. And I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but from the perspective of the UFC, that's an amazing thing because Sean O'Malley brings in so many kids. He went through the social media route, you know, the streams, all that kind of stuff. It's all linked together, and it's created such a humongous following because back in the day, no one gave a shit how many followers you had because social media wasn't a thing. It was like, okay, who are the best fighters on the planet? Let's get them all together and compete, you know? But now it's all about, like, the first question you'll be asked on a forum or anything for that matter is how many followers you have. And that's like essentially the most important thing is because they're getting free marketing out of you. You know, if I'm an average fighter from Japan who has 2 million followers in Japan, or I'm like an absolute stud in the US, but I have 5,000 followers, pretty sure they're going to go with the guy from Japan because the marketing value there is through the roof. So it's an entertainment company at the end of the day. It's not who the best fighters are on the planet. Don't get me wrong. You're going to get the best at the top level, but the reality is they're selling a product. You know, the reason CM Punk made a UFC debut pretty much staples what I just stated. Like, there are going to be instances where there are fighters that should have never, ever set foot in a UFC cage, but they have because of, you know, outlying reasons in regards to who they are, who they can draw, who they know, or what they think that the company, or what they think that they could potentially do for the company. Another example was Bo Nickel. Right. Bo Nickel had all the hype. He did everything, you know, to get to where he got to. And then he fought RDR. And, you know, RDR has fought some of the best in the world outside of the promotion, multiple division champ. And, you know, he got zero respect from the bettors, from everybody. And you could see, you know, there's a huge hole in his game. And I feel like a lot of these guys coming up, yes, social media puts pressure on people and all this and then the other, but there are a lot of guys that are going to have holes in their game because they've been told, okay, yes, you're the best at this, you're so good, you're an amazing wrestler, you did this, you did that, no one can get you. But it's MMA at the end of the day. You can't get hit in the body while wrestling, then you're never going to make it in the sport. And yeah, off topic, just watching that fight, it was right after D-Rod, so I was in the back watching it, and I was like, as soon as they started, I could just see RDR just started punching him in the body. Like, he wasn't even trying to hit him in the head. He was just immediately, like, gut punching him, and I said, watch. I said, I bet you Bo Nickel is going to gas. After that first round, he gassed, and then second round, he quit and went down. So it's hard, man. Like, the sport is so fucking hard. Like, so to make stars, like, yeah, you've seen the situation arise almost every month, every week, where you're like, okay, is this guy going to get fraud checked? Like, you know, a personal friend of mine, Peyton Talbot, is another one. Like, he was a star on the rise, and then he faced his first defeat against a wrestler. And everyone's like, you know what I mean? Like, this is unfortunately what happens in the game, you know, and it's very hard to be consistent when you're fighting guys, you know, just as good, if not better, but just because you have a sick, it's motivating, right? If I'm a nobody and nobody gives a shit about me, and then all of a sudden I'm fighting a guy who's like the next star, you don't think I'm going to be motivated to take him out? You know what I mean? Like, he's got everything I want. So it's like, of course, it's going to make it even harder for these guys coming up because everybody's trying to take their head off. And credit to the guys that do, you know, the guys that can come in and just destroy, and the ones that do, those are a special breed, you know? like just being consistent with their performances, doing what everything is. That's the thing with the fight game. Like for me, my UFC debut went great, and then I fought a 205 world champion, in Impa Kasanganai, and then a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion who's still doing his thing in the UFC right now. So you can't predict who you're going to be facing your first fight in the UFC, your second or third fight. But if you do get a favorable schedule per se, like you have a good manager or you have a good relationship with the UFC, and they're getting you only strikers, no wrestlers, no Dagestanis. There's certain ways to pick and avoid certain ways to get to where you need to go in the UFC. You could fight 3 or 4 fights, get 3 or 4 finishes, and you could be fighting in the top 10. You could get 5 fights in a row. I mean, if in heavyweight you knock 3 guys out, you could be fighting for a title. So it's just about timing, being at the right place, right time, having good management, being able to get you the right fights. And then on top of that, hopefully everything in life is going good too, and if all those things line up, usually, they'll be able to have a star or star in the making. But right now it's like, it seems like they're just waiting for someone. They're waiting for someone to take over. And I don't see it at the moment. I don't see that guy that's going to come out there. And, Tom Aspinall has that ability, in my opinion, to be, I think personally he's the heavyweight GOAT. I don't think Jon Jones would stand a chance against him, in my opinion. That's how I feel. I think he's too big, too strong, too fast. And he's a real heavyweight. He's a 265-pound man. It's funny. I've actually moved around with Tom Aspinall at Extreme Couture. It was just like when we were starting sparring, we just came on the mat. It was like first round light, just touch. And I swear, I've moved around with the likes of Khalil. I've moved around with, big guys. I've moved around with Marcin Tybura, Frank Mir. I've worked with a lot of people, and Tai Tuivasa. So then when I was moving with Aspinall, I was just like, man, this guy is fucking fast. Like I couldn't believe for someone his size how fast he was. And from that day forward, I was like, I don't see anyone beating him. And that's how I felt. So this whole situation with Jon Jones, like I think that's holding up a lot of potential for Tom Aspinall to truly be a star in the sport. But it depends where you're from too. Islam Makhachev's obviously incredible, but I don't think he really relates to much in the U.S., which also same with Ankalaev. No one really cares about Ankalaev. So now that Pereira's not champ, like things are very quiet. So maybe there'll be a fixing in the lineage of all the champions, and things will come back in terms of, popularity and fame. But yeah, I think we've still got some time to see some stars on the rise. I watch every UFC for the most part. I'm tuning into everything, and I think I have an eye for it when I see ability and what people can do. And I haven't seen it yet. I've seen some young guys, some 35ers that are coming up, but outside of that, like there's not a ton of guys that I'm like, oh my God, like this is the guy, And that's just kind of like my perspective on it.
No, and I appreciate that depth of insight. I mean, I always enjoy talking to you because I feel like you have such a great mind for, I guess, just so many aspects of the fight game. But I do also want to be mindful of your time and everything as well, Sasha. We've been talking for a little bit now. The time kind of flew by a little bit for me in a certain regard, but I figured I'd give you the floor if you maybe wanted to add a final parting thought as we're kind of wrapping things up here on Bowks Talking Bouts today.
Yeah, no, all good, man. It was easy conversation. Just if anyone's listening, tuning in, just follow me on social media, Sasha Palatnikov MMA. Obviously got this big fight on Saturday the 14th, Dirty Boxing in Miami, so tune in for that. It's on YouTube. It's going to be good. The card is sick. There's 10 ex-UFC fighters on the card, if I'm not mistaken, and all kinds of competition.
It's going to be a great event. Phile Hawes and Sasha Palatnikov throwing down at DBX 2, and that transpires on June the 14th. This is Bowks Talking Bouts.